How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the PilotPatriot channel. This video is one that I've been looking forward to for a very long time. Today we're going to be taking a look at the US Carbine Caliber 30 M1 or the M1 Carbine. Alright guys, now the M1 Carbine is without a doubt one of the most iconic firearms of all of World War II. Now even though this is called the M1 Carbine and the military did have a history of creating smaller carbine versions of their main rifles, the M1 Carbine is not a smaller version of the M1 Garand. Even though they do have some similarities, the M1 Carbine is a totally different firearm developed for its own unique purpose. Now, if you are interested in learning more about the M1 Garand, I have done a whole video on that. I'll put a link to that right here at the top of the screen if you want to check that out. I also have videos on the 1903 Springfield as well, so make sure you check those out. Now, this firearm has a very rich history, and we're going to talk all about the history of it as well as its features. But first, guys, if you haven't done it yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, hit that notification bell, and give us a thumbs up. Leading up to World War II, the military had been searching for a light rifle that could supplement or even replace the 1911 pistol, and to be carried by troops like drivers, paratroopers, artillery units, mortar teams, radio operators, and officers. These are people that don't need to be carrying around a big heavy M1 Garand, but they wanted something that would be more effective than a pistol. The M1 Carbine is a result of designs by Jonathan Browning, the brother of the famous John Moses Browning, and a guy named David Marshall Williams, who would come to be known as Carbine Williams. David Williams was actually a convicted felon that had designed a short stroke gas system that would eventually be used in the M1 Carbine. Winchester acquired those patents and eventually hired Williams, who worked alongside other Winchester engineers to develop a prototype in just 13 days, just in time for the second round of military trials. That prototype was accepted by the Ordnance Department in 1941 and would go on to become the M1 Carbine that you know today. The M1 Carbine was the most produced military firearm in all of World War II, with over 6 million produced between 1942 and 1945. They produced more of these than even the M1 Garand, which was the standard issue rifle of the time. It would see action in every theater of World War II from mid-1943 all the way until the end of the war, and would be especially effective in the Pacific Theater. One cool side note is that Audie Murphy, the most decorated soldier in all of US history, was issued an M1 Carbine when he served in France. The M1 Carbine would be produced by 10 major contractors and 1,600 subcontractors. Now, World War II was a great example of the power of modern industry. Companies across the US would shift their production from making consumer products to producing arms and other items for the military to help with the war effort. The main contractors of the M1 Carbine were Winchester and the Inland Division of General Motors, which produced the most M1 Carbines, Underwood Typewriters, Rockola Jukebox Company, National Postal Meter, Saginaw Steering Gear, Quality Hardware, which this rifle is produced by Quality Hardware, Standard Products, Irwin Peterson, and IBM. The M1 Carbine is a semi-automatic light rifle with an 18-inch barrel and an overall length of about 36 inches. It has a very nice American walnut stock and has a 15-round detachable magazine. In all, this carbine weighs in at just around 5 pounds. It fires a 30 carbine cartridge, which is significantly smaller than the standard 30-06. And because of that, you'll see a lot of differing opinions on the effectiveness of the M1 carbine. But remember, the M1 carbine really shouldn't be compared to the 30-06 of the M1 Garand. Ballistically, it's not even close. This was developed essentially to bridge the gap between the 1911 pistol and the M1 Garand. And when compared to the 1911, this is extremely effective with decent knockdown power and an effective range out to 300 yards. Now, contrary to what the critics might say, the troops loved the M1 carbine. Many even preferred it, and that's pretty easy to understand because the M1 carbine is much lighter and easier to carry, not to mention the fact that you have a 15-round detachable magazine, and who wouldn't prefer that to the 8-round clip? Now let's get in here and we're going to take a closer look at this carbine. But first, a little backstory. This carbine is produced by Quality Hardware. It has an Underwood barrel and it was produced in early 1944. Now at some point this was re-arsenaled by the Ordnance Department and upgraded probably sometime between World War II and the Korean War. Now this is not only just a great piece of American history, it's also very special because it was given to me by my father-in-law. So let's get in here and we'll take a closer look at the M1 carbine. All the metal parts had a parkerized finish, and you can see here the markings on the receiver. First you have the manufacturer stamp, which on this one is actually hidden underneath the rear sight. Behind that is the serial number. And up here you have US Carbine Cal 30 M1. The operating rod and the rotating bolt are very reminiscent of the Garand. Here we have the charging handle, and it did not hold open on the last round, but there is a button here to lock it in the open position. The rear sight here is the later style, and it is adjustable for windage and elevation. Down here you have the detachable magazine and magazine release, and the push button cross bolt safety. Now in 1945, this was eventually changed to a rotating lever to differentiate between the safety and the mag release. The M1 carbine does have a very respectable trigger pull weight, and I'll show that to you here. It has a metal checkered butt plate, and they had a very unique way of attaching the rear sling. There's a cutout here on the rear of the stock, and it's designed to fit over an oiler bottle. The sling was pushed through and looped around the oiler bottle, and the oiler is actually what holds that sling in place. The front sling swivel is integrated into the front barrel band, which is held in place with a spring clip. Up here we have the bayonet lug, which was likely added sometime between World War II and the Korean War. The front sight is a fixed post with protective wings on each side, and it's not adjustable at all. Here on the barrel you can see we have a manufacturer mark. This one was made by Underwood, who made a lot of barrels for the M1 carbines. This one is dated January 1944, and it has the Flaming Bomb approval mark. The stock on this carbine is a beautiful American walnut with a very attractive grain pattern. And while it does have some dents and dings, this one is actually in great shape. Here on the right side at the back of the stock, you can see the Ordnance Department stamp. And back here on the stock, you can see I have a very popular accessory. This is the stock mag pouch that holds two 15-round magazines. The one I have is stamped Avery 1943. The M1 carbine would see several changes through the years. Some of the most notable are the rear sight that came originally with a two-position flip sight, had a position for 100 yards and a position for 300 yards. That would eventually be changed to a milled adjustable sight, and then finally to a stamped adjustable sight that was easier to produce. Another big change would be the addition of the bayonet lug that wouldn't see very much combat use until after World War II. Some other notable changes are to the cutout around the operating rod that was made larger to prevent braking, and on the M2 carbines they went to a thicker stock that would often be called the potbelly stock, and that was done just to make it stronger. Another was to the top of the bolt that originally came flat and then was changed to a rounded top just to make it easier for mass production. There were other versions of the M1 carbine created over time, like the M1A1 paratrooper carbine that had a folding rear stock. The next was the M2, which was a select fire carbine that moved to a 30-round magazine. And then there was the M3, which was basically an M2 that was adapted to fit an infrared scope. The M1 carbine was issued to every branch of the U.S. military and has served in World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam, and various other places around the world. All right, guys, that's really all I got for now for the M1 carbine. I didn't hit on everything, but it's just a nice overview of the history and the features of it. If you guys have any questions about anything, make sure you let us know in the comment section below. And if you're looking to learn more about the M1 carbine, one great resource for you is the U.S. M1 Carbine's Wartime Production Book by Craig Reish. I will link to this and a few other books on the subject in the description below if you want to check those out. And again, guys, I just love the M1 carbine, especially the fact that I got this one from my father-in-law. Just the history of this carbine is very interesting, and it is a blast to shoot. I hope you liked the video, guys. And don't forget, if you want to see our other videos on the M1 Garand or the M1903 Springfield, I will have links to those in the description. Don't forget to use our links as well. That definitely helps out the channel. Thanks for watching, guys. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.